So with that, I'd like to introduce Barry Scanlon. Barry is also part of WITT O'Brien's, which is a newly merged company. And we have a little video to show you that tells a little bit about WITT O'Brien's. So as soon as you see that, then Barry will come back and start his presentation. So take a look.
Natural disasters are increasing in the United States and around the world. Be it due to urban sprawl, lack of preparedness, or climate change, we know that more natural disasters have been declared by the federal government in the past 10 years than in the 25 previous years combined. Several thousand accidental spills of oil and chemicals occur in coastal waterways each year. Emphasis has been on spill prevention and reducing the total volume of spill materials. WITT O'Brien's, a public safety and crisis management consulting firm, brings a new approach to the crisis and disaster industry by combining the newly merged company's unparalleled experience with innovative planning, training, exercise, and software solutions. At the heart of WITT O'Brien's is a commitment to help communities and corporations deal with disasters and crisis, incidents that communities around the country have never experienced, whether natural or man-made, and they're happening at a rate they had never seen before. Enter WITT O'Brien's, a specialized team of former FEMA officials, retired military officers, and revered subject matter experts who know the ropes of FEMA and government regulation and can manage the long-term recovery of an incident or the immediate aftereffects of an oil spill and establish a cadre of disaster experts to supplement a state or local government's emergency management department or a company's leadership team to support a crisis. Whether it was Hurricane Katrina, Ike, Gustav, the Kulloch grounding, or the BP oil spill, WITT O'Brien's has been called in to manage most every major disaster in the U.S. and around the world over the past 10 years. It is the vision of the founders of WITT O'Brien's to always make a difference for those who are at the worst in a particular point in their lives, whether it be personally or professionally. The team of WITT O'Brien's uses their vision, experience, and drive to be the difference people need during their crisis.
Be here this morning and speak. It's a pleasure to be on the same panel as Rick and Chris. I'm not going to say a lot of different things than they're going to talk about. I think I may say them in a little different way. I know from having worked in the government before, you have to be a little bit gentle and careful about how you ask for things. I don't have those handcuffs myself. But first, I want to thank Dave and the organizers for inviting an emergency management perspective to be part of it and to ask me to be here to do that. We've been fortunate enough over the time that you've had the summit to have folks come and speak a couple of different times over the years, and we're a big believer in emergency communication and how to make sure it's better and better every day. It's something that we strive with our clients, our friends in government that we support. Many of our clients are governors and mayors and other officials, university presidents, who are always sort of caught in a vice and trying to figure out how to get the right message out and how to protect people. You obviously are a big partner in that. So I think I have two major messages here today. One is to say thank you. Over the course of time, we have had, both when we were at FEMA and since we started the firm, one big, when we were at FEMA, federal partner, and that was the National Weather Service and NOAA. There wasn't a time when James Lee wasn't contemplating how to handle a hurricane or any other event that was going on that he didn't want to know what are they saying in Miami, let's get them on the phone. You know, it was sermon from the mount from him in many cases, and he saw that, whether it was Max Mayfield or the host of others that we're good friends with but also partners with, that it would have been impossible to do the job that we were trying to do at FEMA, working with governors and locals and others to be prepared. Of course, we all know a lot more, and we've learned a lot more in the last 15 or 20 years. And then I would say our biggest external partner was always the media, was always you. Whether it was helping, one paper helping another even publish. We were talking about Grand Forks this morning when the whole city was underwater. Obviously, there's countless examples. you know, I thought as I was getting ready for today that I don't know that I've ever spoken to a group where I recognize 75% of the people, but I've never met you. You're massively important to the business of emergency management, and you have such great stature in your own communities or nationally that the second part of my presentation is beg, plead, and cajole you to get more involved. Not that you're not already involved, but more and more involved in how this system is going to evolve. We've learned a lot in the last 15 or 20 years. Obviously, we've heard with Chris what they're going to be doing to try and simplify the messages or complicate them if it helps get people to act the right way. And there's a whole community. One of the best things that Administrator Fugate has done at FEMA is talk about the whole of community. It is not just Governor Christie, it's not President Obama, it's not a particular mayor, it's the utilities, it's the media. There's a whole host of people, and it goes right down to the homeowner and whether or not that homeowner has prepared themselves and is helping to protect their neighbors and helping to respond to that. So I just wanted to really thank both groups. I don't think that there's been an occasion in my professional career, whether it was at FEMA or since we moved into the private sector, where both the Weather Service and the folks who work in our government to help get those messages and with all of their intelligence and background to bring that together, and then the way that all of you communicate it. I don't think that there's been a project that we've been involved in or a disaster or an event where it hasn't been integral to how that event really played out. So I think, I don't know, is the PowerPoint? Okay, well, we'll fly without it. So the real message that I wanted to share, and we saw some of it in Chris's presentation in the PowerPoint, which we'll probably just put up later, right, is a couple of things. One is really this evolution over the last 15 or 20 years that you've all seen. If you think about Hugo and the messages that were communicated with that, Andrew, through the 90s with the Oklahoma City bombing and with Floyd leading up to 9/11, and then Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, of course now with Sandy, but there's a host of others. We had the Connecticut snowstorm that knocked out power for 10 days. If you look at those 15 or 20 years, it's really an emergency management, a crisis pendulum, and it swings back and forth. And Administrator Fugate talks about his Waffle House theory, that a community is doing okay if the Waffle House is open and people are able to take care of themselves. But I think what we've seen is, obviously, one of the slides is the famous, you know, when's the cavalry coming from Andrew news clip. That was a big part of saying this is now a national responsibility. And that pendulum kept swinging and swinging. Now I think it's swinging a little bit back. Part of whole of community, part of we realize in these budgetary times, and for a host of other reasons, that everyone has a chain of responsibility. And what that leads to is an even more important relationship between the news media and the weather information that we have and with leaders, because they need to have a deep, deep integral partnership with you, or they can't get anywhere. So I would talk about in two ways. One is the preparedness message. We know from the Ad Council that only about 70% of Americans say that they're prepared. And we know from other studies that the most respected person is the local meteorologist. That local has that importance, that you give the information every day, and that you are one of, if not the best ways, to deliver a message to a community. So when we were lucky enough to have the opportunity to start something I worked on at FEMA called Project Impact, Building Disaster-Resistant Communities, plug for Dave. Dave was a big friend and partner at Channel 4 in Washington and helped us promote it. But we had 7 pilot communities around the country. We eventually had 250 communities around the country, 5 in every state. And they were all, they weren't because FEMA National wanted to do it or somebody else wanted to do it. It was a local public-private partnership. We helped them get started. We had some national partnerships with Visa or State Farm or Home Depot or other people that would support those efforts, but they went out and got local partners. And their local meteorologists were a big part of trying to communicate that preparedness message. A lot of those communities still exist, and they haven't gotten FEMA funding in 13 years. It's just something that they believe in, and they want to make their communities more prepared. We've seen from Sandy and the past events that your average individual is not prepared enough. And the more that we can communicate those messages, the more we'll all be better off, whether it's with the Red Cross, with FEMA, with your local emergency management, with the Weather Service. These are not, again, very complicated messages, and it's not just about being prepared. It's about the prevention of damage. What are the things that you can do to houses? We all know, we've all seen, a picture of a guy nailing up a 2x4 or sheets of wood. If we can highlight the places that the disaster was lessened because people had taken the right prevention methods, I think it would encourage more people to do it. The second part where I think, and this has been talked about again today already, is really, if you will, in disaster operations. You certainly have all had a role in communicating to individuals what they should do to help themselves and help their families be prepared in the midst of an event. And that's a very important role. But I think, as we saw from Chris's information, and what's happened in the last 20 years, I think you're going to see an even greater risk, frankly, responsibility, and a pull on you to become more a part of this, because there are massive political and policy implications to what goes on in the midst of these events. And I think if you can be a deeper partner in the midst of the operations of these events, it will help everyone. So let me give you an example. One of the things we've seen in Washington, well, we're at collaboration, so we're perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So that's where I wanted to end up anyways. The last few weeks, a little analogy in Washington, what we saw in the last 6 months was a baseball team that got a lot of criticism for not playing a pitcher. And now we've got a football team getting a lot of criticism for playing the quarterback. There's really no right decision, but Mike Shanahan gets paid $6 million a year to make that decision. At the end of the day, it's just a game. Maybe not to every fan, but it's just a game. If you go back to the local level and the subject we're here to talk about today, I think the hardest decision before any local official is whether or not to evacuate. There is no right or wrong answer in many cases. They're balancing policy, political, the economic risk, moving people, and that is something where they are at a loss. One of the things that we preach wherever we go is please listen to your local officials, right? Please do what they say. When we've looked at past independent analysis of nuclear evacuation or other evacuations that have gone on, there's of course varying levels of trust in local and state officials. But what you have in many parts of the country is a local government that's just as reliant on you communicating to their people so that they will listen to them. And I think if we can try and get, and this is not all on your community, I think it's on the emergency management community to reach out to you and figure out how can you work more closely together, how can you coordinate your messages, because at the end of the day, it's going to be that parish president or county executive who's got to decide whether or not to evacuate. And the vast majority of the people he's trying to convince believe you more than they believe him. So working together, I think and I'm not saying that you've got to be in line with the government or be part of their message. I mean, I know that there are some separations that you probably want to keep, and I understand that. But I think that there's got to be a better way. We've seen, we saw during Isaac on the coast where there were some local officials who said, which I had never seen before, I made a mistake, I should have evacuated earlier. I don't think I've ever heard a local official say that, so God bless them for at least standing up on it. But you are going to see more and more. We saw, if you will, the most energy, or negative energy, was related to some disagreements over evacuation during Sandy. Other than that, the vast majority of political leaders worked arm in arm, which I couldn't have been more excited about, because having been through both at FEMA and our current work supporting states and locals, well, I don't have any scientific data for this. I can tell you I've been at a lot of disasters, and when people at the highest levels and all the way through are getting along, the recovery moves quicker. The reason Katrina's recovery still goes on 7 years, because from the first day they weren't getting along. I really believe if half of the camaraderie, collaboration, and lack of partisanship or politics that went through with Sandy, if half of that can exist during the recovery, we're going to see a phenomenal Sandy recovery in all 3 states. So again, you all are an important part of that community, a part of that message, and I just wanted to be here today to, one, be part of the discussion. Thank you for all of your efforts. It's always been a big part of what we've done in the past. And then again, beg, plead, cajole, whatever the right word is, to get you more and more involved, or find out what should the community, you might be able to say today or come up with the reasons as a community, the reason we're not more involved, or we could be more involved if. I mean, you know best what you would need or what the limitations are to how you could be involved. And that's something that we want to be a party to and as helpful with as possible. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.